And like one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director. And he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, he's like, well, like think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out. We hate doctors so much, and it always seems to like end up with a sales pitch. Like it never was like, hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was like always like there's a catch. Mm-hmm. So I didn't. He's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and he
regulated. Like if he was doing this, like Coinbase can't do this. Is that correct?
Yeah, Coinbase is much more heavily scrutinized. They actually have to file with the SEC. Don't invest. Like that's a bad idea.
People were calling bullshit though. Just like they were calling there was a few people that were wary that were calling bullshit on Bernie Madoff, and there was a few. How does a guy like that not wind up getting indicted?
I ask myself that every day. There's so many.
Is it a matter of time, or is it he's
deal? But I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American, so that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is a lot of people had caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just this big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west. Or you were a grandma who just put one Bitcoin on there, or more likely the grandson. He treated all the accounts the same. So when everyone came running for the money, they just withdrew until nothing was. You can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this like fancy language for a way to like anonymize your transaction. Like you put it, really taking that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that,
something, because I was just like, why does this make some people tens of millions of dollars and nothing happens? Why literally had a $10 billion account that he mislabeled with Alameda Research.
Mislabeled?
Yeah, he's
each other on amphetamines and making billions of dollars. Like, it sounds like a great story if it wasn't illegitimate.
Yeah, ultimately that's the problem. Like, Sam was just hopped up on amphetamines.
What is it's a crypto exchange, right? So how does that work?
So the first question is when you learn about crypto, never understood how Bernie Madoff got people because it seems so preposterous. And then I fell for something very similar. And what I notice with all of these things, the thread is, what I know is everyone's always interested in pulling up the ladder after them and like building the kind of the rule book around like, hey, like if you're from this certain jurisdiction that we're a part of, you're fine. If you're not, like
involved in what you do.
It's a weird thing.
So when did you start your YouTube channel?
So I started it a few years ago, 2018, 2019, Yep. Your hands in both pockets. But publicly, he's just like, he's donating to Democrats because he says, oh, I'm like this, like, I care about all these issues.
Yeah.
But it's like even more cynical than just buying one party. Not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became it's really interesting because it was like a battle between FTX and one of their competitors, Binance. So the owner of Binance is, I think it's Changpeng Zhao. He goes by C balances. But oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? Like I forgot. It's so silly. You find it wasn't like he was some random fly-by-night guy. He was well respected in the Wall Street space. People thought he might take over the SEC after like the current person had stepped down. They thought he was going to take it over, like Washington. And I think there was like a tweet from Sam saying like, "Oh, like I'll see you the next time you're in Washington" or something like that. But like, it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. Like he would be dark, where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to be, your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually, they have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us, we're not going to touch it, we're not going to move it. That's what there was a lot of fear of missing out, or FOMO, in the markets at the time. You know, everyone thought, oh, cryptos, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now, most of this 10 billion is just their own tokens. So CZ takes this opportunity to kind of spread some, you know, sort of information about that. He says, hey, we're actually, and then he goes into the crypto space and he launches FTX.
He's very young, right? How old is he?
I think he is young. I'm not, maybe you can look that up, Jamie. 31. There's no Ethereum left. There's no Bitcoin left. You don't have the real tokens anymore. You just have your sort of nonsense FTT tokens, the tokens you invented. And he said, oh, the problem is, when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral. Sam wanted to basically influence politics by just donating. And the idea is you donate to both sides, you can never lose, right?
Yeah.
If you have your handle now is they're finding a bunch of campaign finance violations because he was trying to influence politics, U.S. politics. I mean, it's insane how deep FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh, that's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly.
On sticks or something. Like, it was never, the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right?
Why the celebrities are important. And that's why
it's a huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part. Yes, because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I'm, you know.
Wild. The fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse, this $40 billion penthouse. The things, it's insane. It's really, I almost wish.
They're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job. Like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, you're just like, well, you know, there were some margin trading accounts. And I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you. And they wanted. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that.
And then when you have them on, there's a lot of I wasn't aware. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of that. I don't know. There was all this hemming and basically like, you know, shell games where you're hiding the money.
Yeah. You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later, but you actually own a bunch of Ethereum. What are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with
Will fall for something doesn't mean you're safe. Like, you have to do. I hate to say do your own research because that's such an overused, like, scammy phrase. It's actually such like a phrase like that, you know, it's almost used.
I don't really understand what's going, like the FTX thing, for example, is the best one because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, what is happening? Like, what are they doing? Try to break it down for us. Like, first of all,
might be one of the first, like, trillionaires or whatever, like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys, or because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want,
it's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff. That these basically nerds in cryptography thought of, which is it's brilliant. I mean, it is brilliant because it is basically it's almost impossible to trace. After the fact, he's like he's still playing video games, and you're like, can you have the decency to get off the video game and talk to people?
So bizarre. It's just so bizarre.
Kept making the videos, and ultimately they never did. But but I start doing that, and after I cover get rich quick schemes for a while, is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of like caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all. I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of, have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos, some reactions, but not much. What I noticed is it resonated with people beyond the views, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like I was just like, there was something different about the reaction to it. Like, and Vic stuff, you're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities? Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who he's the son of two Harvard lawyers.
Gotten away with it?
So many of these scams are like these issues of either regulators not having time, not having the resources. This Coinbase, it seems like they're, legitimate, but so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is like money to a politician on my behalf. You're a straw donor. You're not really a donor. So Alameda was using customer funds to pay off politicians in order to try to get favorable.
Jamie's looking it up.
I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and now I don't want to say the wrong one. A16Z.
A16. It means playing League of Legends while on investor calls. Like, at the time, that was seen as this charming, genius thing.
On calls.
On calls. You could hear, even actually, a lot of people found out about crypto the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the, most fair case you could make about, I saw this, and that my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to I want to say something, but why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video, just really everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people noticed, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like they had a Serum token, which they control most of.
And probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was saying FTX US was. I hadn't really found my footing, but throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with hucksters and fraud, where when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer, and that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives, and I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down. You think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, X dollars. Let's say it's worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back this thing. So all this money's going in, and then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time of was going on, now he's still trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent, and right now, actually, the big kind of scam. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it, and you'll catch some people, but ultimately, a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been lateral dollars or some asset. We'll give you FTT tokens, which is their own invented coin. And that should have value if anything goes wrong. And people were accepting that as value. I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. One of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them, and, I have to do the... You're it's this magic internet money.
Magic.
How do you get some of that? How do you get some of that magic internet money? Well, you have to go somewhere to buy it. And so it's a crypto exchange is where you kind of go. You put your fiat, everything. I don't have access to the book. I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda. I used to be just like you, Joe. But then, I found out that doing Amazon drop shipping is the way to make millions of dollars. And, I used to fail, but by these little tricks, I'm this guy who's going to maximize good in the world. and that was his reason for working all the time. I mean, that's the justification to be hopped up on amphetamines. It's like maximize productivity, maximize human happiness. FTX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had to look at their books. Like it was very opaque.
Regulators, when he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations, how could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? Like what could they have possibly done to make it easy?
And it's like, well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who is this degenerate day trader, the money system has to be safe. Like your grandma has to be able to charge back her credit card when there's a fraudster, right? Like,
Yeah.
or this whole thing doesn't work. You can't rely on people being technically savvy in order to. Where's the money? I don't know, but he controls everything. And so it's like this is the tactic of these offshore companies is like you put his whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet, and he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called we're just going to do a few transactions through your name. That just came out in a press release. It's the new charges. He was basically like they call them straw donors because it's like if I give money to you to give. That is his background. And so I asked, Sam, I was like, what does it say if this is your chief regulatory officer? This guy.
Easier or more profitable for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would he do that?
I'm not as familiar with the regulation side of things. People were talking about that a lot. And she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, like, you got to get the surgery. Like, this ain't going to fly. You have to, ultimately get the surgery. In the terms of service, they said results may vary. What's that about?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately, it's like, and so I realized, like, there's this sophisticated way that they're preying on my psychology and their success. 2 months, you're going to be making 5 figures a month. 10 months, maybe 6 figures a month. And I've done it for people before. That's the social proof. I've shown people how to do this. I'm a millionaire by the time I'm 23 years old. Just buy my course. My course is, $2,000. Pay me $2,000. I'll teach you to get rich quick. So launches FTX in 2019. And that's a crypto platform where, honestly, you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity, not having sort of like, it's maybe not big enough. They're good people, a lot of the people going after these guys, but it's like trying to catch everyone who's speeding. 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here. But the problem is that with the Lee, Sam goes, "Oh, you won like our battle." And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customer? So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange. And the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. Now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank, as a Matt Levine interview with Sam Bankman-Fried. He didn't call him a fraud outright, but he's like, "Hey, it seems like you're in the Ponzi business, and business is good."
Whoa! And what did he say to that?
I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist.
I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this,
he'd be afraid of being indicted, or I don't really understand why he can't go, but he can't go to America. So Sam was meeting with regulators. CZ felt cut out, like he was basically going to get a bad deal. I lied my way into it. I can sort of lie my way out of it. And this is what he did. So prior to this, I'd interviewed him twice before, and I had kind of gotten hamstrung with he's just so good at dodging stuff. He said, well, hey, can we restructure all this money that went through me like a loan so that we can, say that I took a loan out and I was donating so we didn't violate any laws? They never ended up doing that. Your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any story. So this is funny. they found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League.
Bizarre that so many people got duped, and I felt the same way about Bernie Madoff. You know, I'm not a financially aware person. I'm not into the market. I don't follow these things.
The account fiat at FTX, and so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured. But ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me. I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me. They bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it. Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names and also all these other wallets that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's like it's just crazy. It's a crazy idea.
Oh,
or with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house like reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in in a stew. Then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader. All the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in watching this stuff. And you start to have repeat occurrences. Like I just cover stuff all the time, and you see echoes of the same thing. I just had somebody just a couple of days ago I was interviewing for this news scheme we're looking at, and he said, I know this stuff went down. And a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of like, actually, his whole technique of shifting the blame like onto Alameda and like, I don't control Alameda. I've seen something very similar. I'm investigating this Ponzi scheme that's offshore. So he called it fiat at FTX. But it was a $10 billion hole.
What do you mean by mislabeled?
Well, it was on a spreadsheet, Joe. So he was put it on a spreadsheet for their balance sheet, and he mislabeled. You put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does it work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cap. Senator's office reached out to me. They're like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't know, man. You guys have to – this is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, y'all are very strange. And these offshore entities were also using like U.S. branches. Like there's FTX U.S., which was like more regulated but not really that regulated. We don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger. Like there's Binance. Very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went?
Assets. You can check yourself. Like, I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right.
These exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices. And then after he made his money that way, he thinks he can reestablish control because he's so smart. He is such a good liar that he's like, I can just lie my way out of it. So I think that's why he ultimately talked. His idea was, if I LGBTQ plus causes, and it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through. Is he on Twitter? I probably butchered his name. But he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in. And from the arms of one huckster to another, like it's just like it's almost to something worse. You can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this, and I started like seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Or system to where they could see you, Joe, deposit a Bitcoin on FTX. They could grab that Bitcoin and start trading with it immediately. Even though they were never supposed to be able to pilfering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's on...
And it's like sort of what's left after the guy who kind of was spearheading this bill like was a fraud. It's kind of tough. I was actually randomly like some company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage. Hey, just make this problem go away. this is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some, like, third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that very treatable kind of cancer, and she's fine. But at the time I watched her as she's like, gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer, lack of regulation and the ability to send peer-to-peer, which means like you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams, all. And ultimately, one of the ways, like even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about. And they were like donating through them for like all these, they've recently been shut down. But the idea was
just the idea of putting your money into Tornado Cash.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is there a better views about what? Like you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies. And he broke that showed that maybe they're not as healthy as they should be. There would have been a run on the banks and people would have found out. It's just like, when are they going to find out? He happened to be the final straw, if that makes sense.
So someone would have figured it was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that.
Like, nobody knew what was going on behind the scenes. So even though they said, like, we're not going to touch your money, as soon as you deposited Bitcoin, I mean, I talked to some of the insiders at Alameda. They said they had this back door. It's this guy who drives a Toyota.